Imagine, for just a second, walking into a building on a Tuesday morning,
Ugh.
and you're walking through those doors for one reason and one reason only. You are, like, entirely out of options.
Right, you're just desperate.
Exactly. You're desperate for a hot meal. You need a coat because, the weather is turning bitter.
You're just trying to survive.
Yeah, you need, quite literally, the bare minimum caloric and thermal energy just to survive the next 12 hours. That is chapter 1 of your story.
Which is a brutal reality for so many people.
It really is. But then, imagine a few months pass. You are walking out of those exact same doors, under that exact same roof.
But something has changed.
Completely.
Yeah.
This time, you aren't carrying a donated coat. You're carrying a certification in artificial intelligence.
Wow. That's quite a pivot.
Right. You have a portfolio in software development, you have a polished resume, a professional network, and, like, a direct line to a high-paying career.
That's incredible.
And here is the element that completely shatters our conventional expectations. This entire transformation from seeking a hot meal to launching a career in commercial tech, it all happened inside a church.
Yeah, it forces a total recalibration of what we think a community space is actually capable of achieving.
Definitely.
Because we are so conditioned to separate the spheres of spiritual charity and, high-level economic empowerment.
Right. We put them in different boxes.
Exactly. But what we are looking at here intentionally collides them.
And that collision is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have this really fascinating stack of source material today.
It's super comprehensive.
It is. It's basically a foundational document, like a philosophical and architectural blueprint for an organization called Crossover Community or Crossover Church.
Right.
So our mission today is to analyze this long-term vision. We are going to explore how they plan to redefine the intersection of Christian faith, boots on the ground survival assistance, and, well, cutting-edge technology.
Before we get too deep, we should probably establish the parameters of these sources right away.
Yeah, good point.
The documents we are analyzing represent a roadmap. This is a highly detailed vision for the future.
So it's not a place you can just go visit right now.
Right. The specific services, the tech facilities, the educational programs we're going to debate today, these are planned goals.
Got it.
We are looking at the foundational blueprint of what Crossover Community intends to physically and socially construct over time.
That's a crucial distinction. We are looking at the architectural plans before the concrete is even poured.
Exactly.
But, what immediately stands out in these documents isn't just the sheer logistical scale of the ambition, it's the origin story.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this blueprint doesn't read like a sterile urban renewal project drafted by a committee.
No, not at all.
And it doesn't read like a tech startup trying to hack poverty for a tax write-off either.
Right. It has a completely different tone.
The entire framework of this massive technological and spiritual hub is actually the manifestation of a deeply personal family legacy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where does an institutional vision of this magnitude actually start?
Well, it starts with one specific individual,
Yeah.
the founder's grandfather.
Okay.
The ultimate objective of Crossover Community, the driving force behind this entire blueprint, is to establish a physical church that carries forward his grandfather's legacy.
So it's deeply personal right from the jump.
Oh, completely. He wasn't just a casual figure in the family. He was a well-liked pastor who functioned as an institution in his own right.
Like a pillar of his community.
Exactly. He was known far and wide for his dedication to helping people.
Yeah.
And he was the primary spiritual teacher in Crossover's life.
Right.
He was the one who brought the gospel to him, which ended up being incredibly transformative.
When we usually talk about inheriting a legacy, my mind immediately goes to the tangible stuff.
Right, the physical assets.
Yeah. We think of a pocket watch, a piece of real estate, maybe a trust fund if you're lucky. We are culturally trained to view a legacy as an asset that is handed, to you.
And what's fascinating here is the transition from a passive inheritance to an active legacy. That's where the psychology gets really interesting.
How so?
Well, a true legacy, the kind that possesses enough kinetic energy to alter the trajectory of an entire community, isn't left to you. It is left in you.
Oh, I like that distinction. Left in you.
Yeah. If we look at the source text, the grandfather didn't just leave behind a collection of fond memories. He installed a very specific architecture of the soul into Crossover.
Right.
He left him with a deep-rooted faith. He left him with practical lived knowledge.
And a burning compassion for marginalized people.
Exactly. He modeled a form of leadership that viewed authority not as a mechanism for power, but as a strict posture of service.
Which is so rare. I mean, he lived the example. It wasn't just theoretical theology, you know, it was applied sociology.
Right.
Crossover actually watched his grandfather do the work, day in and day out.
And he gave him the gospel, which Crossover explicitly credits with transforming and ultimately saving his life.
Yeah, that's a huge theme in the documents.
But if we dig into the emotional core of this foundation, the most catalytic element the grandfather transferred wasn't just theological.
What was it?
It was his absolute, unwavering belief in Crossover.
Wow.
He didn't just hope Crossover would do well. He actively believed he could start a church, and he pushed him to pursue that specific, massive vision.
I want to pause on that because the mechanics of belief are incredibly powerful.
They really are.
But from an analytical standpoint, it also raises a massive psychological hurdle.
How do you mean?
Well, how do you carry an imposing figure's legacy forward without simply defaulting to becoming a carbon copy of them?
Okay.
If your grandfather was this towering figure of faith and service in a specific era, there has to be an immense gravitational pull to just, put on his exact shoes.
To preach his exact sermons.
Exactly, and recreate his ministry point for point.
Yeah, that is the ultimate trap of legacy. It's the anxiety of influence.
Right.
You see it constantly in multi-generational organizations.
Yeah.
The successor feels the pressure to act as museum curator for the past rather than an architect for the future.
And then the organization usually just stagnates.
Precisely. But what is remarkable about the Crossover blueprint is the act of translation.
Translation.
Yeah, Crossover isn't trying to build a historical reenactment of his grandfather's ministry.
Okay.
He is extracting the core spirit of what he was taught, the absolute, non-negotiable imperative to serve hurting people, and he is translating that imperative into a modern language.
A language that solves the unique, crushing, highly technological challenges of today's world.
Exactly.
So it's like, it's about extracting the source code and rewriting the software for a completely new operating system.
That is the exact mechanism, and it leverages a psychological phenomenon known as the Pygmalion effect.
Oh, what's that?
It's the power of internalized validation. Think about what happens when someone legitimately believes in you before you possess the evidence to believe in yourself.
Right.
When you are young or when you are struggling to find direction, you often lack an internal generator of self-worth. You are running on empty.
Yeah, you just don't have it yet.
But when an authority figure like a respected grandfather looks at you and says, "I see your capacity to build and to lead," that external belief acts as a temporary scaffolding.
Oh, wow. So you kind of borrow their confidence until your own infrastructure can support the weight.
Precisely. You internalize their voice until it becomes your own default internal monologue.
That's beautiful.
And once that belief solidifies, it doesn't just sustain the individual. It looks for an outlet. It becomes the fuel for an outward-facing vision.
Right, you want to give it away.
Yeah, Crossover is taking the intense belief that his grandfather poured into him, and he's designing an institution to pour that exact same belief into a low-income community.
A community that has been systematically starved of it. You know, that transition from personal belief to institutional action is just fascinating.
It's quite the leap.
Because we talk about inheriting this grand spiritual and emotional legacy, but when you look at the reality of the specific neighborhoods Crossover wants to serve,
Yeah.
the people walking those streets aren't asking for a legacy. They're asking for a sandwich.
Right.
They're asking for a safe place to sleep. And that forces a major collision between high-minded theological ambition and cold, hard physical survival.
Which brings us directly to the ground floor of the Crossover Community Roadmap.
Okay, let's get into the practical side.
The blueprint explicitly targets a low-income demographic. These are people who are actively drowning in systemic struggles.
They are just trying to keep their heads above water.
Exactly. And to address that, the first planned tier of their intervention is entirely visceral. It is immediate.
We're talking basic needs here.
We are looking at a robust food pantry. We are looking at clothing assistance. We're looking at dedicated support and shelter resources for individuals experiencing homelessness.
It's the survival tier. And to understand why this is the foundational step, we have to really dissect the mechanics of poverty.
Go on.
Because surviving in a low-income urban environment is an exhausting, all-consuming, full-time job.
Oh, absolutely.
If you don't know where your next meal is coming from, or the temperature's dropping and you don't own a winter coat.
Or you're trying to figure out which 24-hour business will let you sit in a booth all night without kicking you out.
Right. If that's your reality, your entire cognitive bandwidth is consumed by the next 12 hours.
Sociologists refer to this as a state of constant neurological triage.
Neurological triage, wow.
The human brain, when subjected to extreme scarcity, physically alters its processing priorities.
Like it shifts into a different gear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You experience a drastic reduction in executive function. That's the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning, career strategizing, or, abstract philosophical thought.
Right, because every ounce of neural energy is diverted to immediate threat mitigation and resource acquisition. So offering high-level AI training or depth spiritual counseling to someone who doesn't know where they are sleeping tonight is, well, it's like trying to build a beautiful roof on a house that doesn't have a foundation yet.
That's a perfect analogy.
Or like trying to install a massive software update on a smartphone with a dead battery. It doesn't matter how incredible the software is. The hardware has to be powered first.
And food, clothing, and safe shelter, those are the power sources.
Exactly.
That is the exact friction point where traditional models of charity often fail.
How so?
Well, in many historical models, an institution might prioritize the spiritual above the physical, offering a long sermon and maybe a cup of soup as an afterthought.
Oh, right. Like there are strings attached.
Exactly. But the crossover vision applies a rigid adherence to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay, yeah.
The blueprint acknowledges a profound biological and sociological truth. You cannot expect a human being to search for higher purpose or re-enter the workforce if their core physiological needs are completely unmet.
The vision outlines an intention to be a first responder. Yes.
And that requires meeting people exactly where they are, not where society wishes they were, right?
Yeah.
Not where they should be based on some moralistic framework, but where they physically and mentally are in that exact moment.
And where they are is almost always a place of profound, debilitating isolation.
Yeah.
Poverty isn't just a lack of capital. It is a severing of social ties. People experiencing homelessness or severe addiction are often treated as invisible by the general public.
They just get walked past on the street.
Exactly. So within this blueprint, the act of handing over a hot meal or a winter coat isn't merely a transactional transfer of calories or fabric.
It's way deeper than that.
It is a highly symbolic intervention. It is the first tangible physical evidence that a person's life still possesses inherent value.
Wow.
When a volunteer looks you in the eye and hands you a meal when you are starving, the subtext of that interaction is revolutionary to someone who feels abandoned.
It communicates, I see you.
You exist, and you matter enough to be sustained. The source documents use specific phrasing for this transition. They talk about crossover as a symbol of moving from one chapter to another.
Right. Those specific transitions.
Yeah, moving from hopelessness to hope, moving from surviving to rebuilding.
Yeah.
That hot meal, that night of shelter, that is the mechanism that arrests the free fall. It stops the bleeding.
It creates a baseline of stability. However, the blueprint is remarkably clear-eyed about the limitations of basic charity.
Okay.
Survival, as critical as it is only chapter 1. If an institution only provides food and clothing, it functions as a highly effective life support machine.
It keeps people alive.
Right. But it does not equip them to escape the gravitational pull of their environment.
I see.
To truly help families transition from surviving to rebuilding, the organization has to attack the architecture of poverty itself.
And when you look at how this blueprint attacks systemic barriers, it targets one of the most crippling, universally devastating bottlenecks in modern society.
It's a huge issue.
This is the part of the plan where I really had to step back and analyze the sheer logistical audacity of what they are proposing. We're talking about the childcare crisis.
It is a massive, structurally load-bearing pillar of the crossover vision.
Yes.
The organization plans to provide free, on-site daycare assistance specifically designed for single parents.
I want to spend significant time exploring this because if you aren't currently trapped in the socioeconomic vice grip of childcare, it is really hard to comprehend just how paralyzing it is.
It's almost invisible to people outside of it.
Exactly. If you're a single parent in a marginalized neighborhood, you are waking up every single day to an agonizing, mathematically impossible paradox.
Right.
You absolutely must work to provide for your child. But the jobs readily available to you in that demographic often pay minimum wage or maybe slightly above it.
And the cost of daycare just eats all of that.
Yes. The cost of safe, reliable, licensed daycare is astronomical.
Let's break down the actual math of that trap because it illustrates why this intervention is so radical.
Please do.
If a single mother is making $15 an hour, she is bringing home roughly $600 a week before taxes.
Okay.
In many urban centers, basic daycare can easily cost $300 to $400 a week.
So before she has bought a single bag of groceries, paid rent, or put gas in her car, more than half her income vanishes just to allow her the privilege of going to work.
It is a systemic, zero-sum game. She is expending 40 hours of labor, essentially, just to pay the person watching her child while she labors.
It's just spinning wheels.
Exactly. She isn't building savings. She isn't gaining upward mobility. She is treading water with a heavy weight tied to her ankle.
And it's so precarious.
Furthermore, the system is entirely rigid. If her child spikes a fever, the daycare won't accept them.
Right.
If she stays home, she loses a shift. If she loses too many shifts, she is terminated. It is an economic trap explicitly designed to keep the working poor exactly where they are.
So when Crossover Community puts free daycare inside the church's resource hub, they are detonating that trap.
Yes, completely.
But I have to push back here on the execution because, I see the vision, but isn't there a massive risk of mission creep?
That's a fair concern.
We usually expect the government or heavily subsidized state programs to handle something as complex as free daycare.
Right.
A church taking on the liability, the licensing, the staffing, and the continuous funding of a daycare facility that is a monumental, risky undertaking.
Oh, it's huge.
Does the benefit actually outweigh the institutional risk of trying to be everything to everyone?
Well, it's the right question to ask because the failure rate for community centers that overextend themselves is pretty high.
Right, they burn out.
But if you look at the strategy behind the blueprint, they are taking on this immense logistical burden because severing the childcare chain is the prerequisite for all other economic growth.
Oh, I see.
By absorbing the cost and liability of daycare, the church instantly stabilizes the parent financially.
That makes sense.
That $300 a week is immediately injected back into the family's microeconomy for housing stability and nutrition.
It's like a direct weekly economic stimulus to the family.
Yes. And simultaneously, it provides a safe, enriching, early cognitive development environment for the child, which addresses the generational aspect of poverty.
Right. The kids are getting a head start, too.
But beyond the economics, it addresses the sociological deficit. It transforms isolation into community.
That's a great point. Single parenthood, especially in poverty, is brutally lonely.
Exactly. By centralizing childcare within a community hub, these parents are forced into proximity with one another. They form organic mutual aid networks.
They build a support system.
But above all else, providing free daycare gives a single parent the one resource that money usually buys, which they have been entirely starved of.
Time.
Exactly. Time to decompress, time to heal from the physiological trauma of constant stress.
Yeah.
And, most vitally for the next phase of the crossover vision, it gives them the time required to actually learn.
Because if you suddenly hand a single parent 40 hours a week where they know their child is completely safe and they aren't paying a dime for it, the immediate question becomes, how do we leverage that time to permanently alter their trajectory?
Right.
And we've talked about the psychological shift of getting time back, but what you actually do with that time. Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where this blueprint veers completely off the traditional map.
It represents a total 21st century paradigm shift for a faith-based organization.
We are talking about placing artificial intelligence training inside the sanctuary.
It's wild to even say out loud.
Right. The vision for Crossover Community includes building out the infrastructure to provide on-site training in AI, software development, and digital marketing.
We need to sit with the contrast of that image for a moment because it is staggering.
It really is.
When the cultural imagination pictures church-based charity, We visualize soup kitchens. We
Yeah.
visualize sorting through bins of donated clothes. We visualize handing out canned goods from a basement.
Which is all great stuff.
Absolutely. Those are vital, beautiful acts of baseline survival assistance. But the architects of crossover are analyzing the macroeconomic horizon.
They are looking ahead.
They are looking at the realities of modern capitalism and concluding, charity's a Band-Aid. We need to offer mastery.
Wow. Mastery. It's the ultimate evolution of the old proverb, right? Give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime.
Right.
But instead of handing a marginalized person a wooden fishing pole and pointing them toward a shrinking pond, Crossover wants to teach them how to engineer, build, and command a state-of-the-art commercial tech fleet.
Exactly. They aren't aiming for the middle class. They're aiming for the absolute top of the economic food chain.
And they are doing so to combat a specific, insidious systemic issue known as the digital divide.
Yes. In low-income communities, the lack of access to future-focused technology isn't just a minor educational gap. It is a death knell for upward mobility.
Explain that a bit more.
Generational wealth disparities mean these communities often lack high-speed infrastructure. Their public schools are underfunded and lack modern hardware.
Right, they are just inherently behind.
And they have zero proximity to the networking hubs of Silicon Valley or major tech corridors.
And the cruel irony is that the very jobs that are traditionally available to people trying to climb out of poverty—
Data entry, basic logistics, warehouse labor.
Exactly, administrative support. Those are the exact jobs that AI and automation are poised to permanently eliminate in the next decade.
Precisely. If you do not understand the digital economy, you are not just left behind. You are actively locked out of the primary engine of wealth generation for the next century.
That's a terrifying prospect.
So, by forcing AI, training, software engineering, and digital marketing curriculums into the physical space of a community church, Crossover is attempting to forcefully democratize the future.
Wow.
They are taking the specific tools that are currently hoarding wealth in the upper echelons of the tech sector, and they are planting them directly in the soil of a low-income neighborhood.
But let's look at the mechanics of executing this, because again, the friction between the idea and the reality is intense.
Oh, the execution is incredibly difficult.
How does a community church actually pull this off? You can't just hand someone a laptop and say, go learn Python.
No, absolutely not.
You need enterprise-level hardware. You need instructors who actually understand large language models and full-stack development.
Right.
If you teach someone to code in a vacuum without industry standards, no tech firm is going to hire them over a traditional computer science graduate from a university.
That is the execution hurdle.
Yeah.
And while the blueprint is a roadmap, the implicit strategy here relies on utilizing the church as a third space.
A third space.
An incubator that the community actually trusts. Marginalized individuals often feel immense imposter syndrome stepping onto a sterile corporate campus or a massive university.
Oh, sure. They feel like they don't belong there.
The church is familiar. It feels safe. To execute the training, organizations like this typically have to forge aggressive partnerships with existing tech firms for corporate social responsibility initiatives.
Right. Tapping into those resources.
Utilizing open source curriculums and remote mentorships. But the physical space, the safe harbor to actually sit and focus, is what the church provides.
And think about the psychological rewiring that happens in that room.
It's massive.
Think about the symbolic transition the source material talks about. Moving from having no purpose to having purpose. Moving from being completely lost to having distinct direction.
Yeah.
If you are a struggling individual, maybe you have a criminal record, maybe you are a recovering addict, or maybe you have just been repeatedly beaten down by an educational system that explicitly told you that you were not valuable.
Right.
What happens to your core identity when an institution looks at you and says, we don't just want to feed you, we believe you are smart enough and capable enough to master artificial intelligence?
It is profoundly disruptive to their internal narrative of failure.
Disruptive in a good way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Society has constantly broadcasted a message that their intellectual ceiling is minimum wage manual labor.
And they start to believe it.
When a trusted community figure hands them the curriculum for the literal future of human technology, it is an act of radical elevation. It shatters the psychological glass ceiling.
It is a profound institutional echo of the grandfather's belief in crossover.
Oh, that's a great connection.
Right. The grandfather looked at a young crossover and said, I believe in you. I believe you possess the capacity to build something massive.
And he did.
Now, Crossover is projecting that exact same radical belief onto an entire zip code. He is looking at the marginalized, the people society has written off as a liability, and saying, I believe you can learn this. I believe you can master the tools of the future.
It is the legacy manifesting in real time. He is distributing the belief that was given to him.
Yeah.
However, as visionary as this educational component is, the blueprint recognizes a harsh economic reality.
What's that?
Learning high-income skills in a vacuum does not guarantee a high-income life.
Right, there's more to it than just knowing the code.
You can understand how to train a neural network, you can write flawless code, but if you do not understand the hidden language of corporate hiring,
Oh, yeah.
if your resume doesn't pass through an automated applicant tracking system, you are still facing an insurmountable wall.
Which brings us to the final bridge. The blueprint doesn't stop at the classroom door.
No, it doesn't.
It accounts for the final and often most intimidating phase of the journey, actually crossing over into the professional ecosystem.
Segment 5 of this roadmap focuses entirely on the pipeline.
Okay.
The Resource Hub is designed to provide professional resume assistance, targeted employment resources, and direct pipelines to businesses and open positions that the participants have been trained for.
They are architecting a closed-loop system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer brilliance of the holistic design becomes apparent. It is an end-to-end ecosystem of human rehabilitation.
Let's trace it. Walk me through the timeline of a single participant. Let's see how this all connects.
Okay. A woman walks through the doors of Crossover Community. She is exhausted, she is hungry, and she is at the absolute end of her rope.
Okay.
Phase 1. She visits the food pantry and receives warm clothing. Her immediate visceral panic, the neurological triage, is subdued.
Her hardware is powered.
Right. Phase 2. She's introduced to the free daycare facility. She enrolls her child, instantly lifting a crushing financial and logistical burden off her shoulders.
She now possesses time and mental clarity.
Exactly. Phase 3.
Yeah.
She utilizes that time to walk down the hall and sit in a classroom where she is trained in digital marketing and software development. She acquires a high-income, future-proof skill.
And then the transition to the market.
Phase 4. She sits down with a specialist within the church who helps her translate those newly acquired skills into a corporate standard resume, teaching her the soft skills of interviewing.
And then the final step.
Phase 5. The church taps into its curated network of employment partners and connects her directly with businesses actively looking to hire diverse tech talent. She walks in needing a meal to survive the night, and she walks out with a sustainable career, her child cared for, and her dignity entirely restored.
It is an incredibly ambitious, almost utopian roadmap.
It's massive.
But I have to toy the skeptic here regarding the human element.
Go for it.
This is an extraordinarily long, grueling journey for anyone to make. Moving from darkness to light, moving from surviving the streets to rebuilding a life in the tech sector, it requires immense, almost superhuman resilience.
Without a doubt.
Learning to code is frustrating.
Yeah.
Facing rejection from job interviews is demoralizing.
Yeah, it's not a smooth path.
Healing from the deep, complex trauma of generational poverty is agonizing. How does a community actually keep people from giving up halfway through this pipeline?
That's the real challenge.
Because a beautifully formatted resume doesn't give you hope when you are despairing at 2 a.m. A software certification doesn't comfort you when the trauma of your past flares up and you feel completely alone.
You have identified the exact friction point where purely secular, purely mechanical interventions often stall out.
Right.
Practical tools. The daycare, the food, the laptops, as revolutionary as they are ultimately just machinery.
They're just objects.
And a vehicle with the most advanced engine in the world goes absolutely nowhere without a combustible fuel source.
Wow, yes.
A human being, even provided with all the resources in the world, will inevitably collapse under the weight of their own trauma if they do not possess an underlying engine of spiritual and emotional support.
You cannot sustain a multi-year journey from darkness to light on purely mechanical economic terms.
The system requires a soul.
And this brings us to the beating heart of the entire crossover vision. The reason this blueprint isn't just for a secular community center or a corporate tech boot camp.
Exact.
The reason it is, fundamentally and unapologetically, a church. It brings us to the core message delivered by Pastor Art and the spiritual engine that powers the machinery. Faith in action.
The central foundational message of Pastor Art, and the bedrock upon which the entire crossover community is designed, is the belief that individuals are saved through Jesus Christ.
Right.
The stated mission of the church, is to constantly, relentlessly encourage people to maintain faith, hope, and love, especially during the most difficult, agonizing, and seemingly hopeless phases of their transition.
And I want to frame this very clearly for you, the listener, right now.
Yeah, it's important.
We are analyzing the foundational texts and the driving psychological motivations of this specific community. These are expressions of Crossover's deeply personal calling and his specific religious faith.
Right.
You do not have to share their theology. You do not have to be a Christian or accept any of these religious claims to deeply appreciate and analyze the immense practical brilliance of the sociological systems they are trying to build.
Absolutely not.
But to understand the why of this project, to understand why they are taking on the massive liability of daycare and AI training, instead of just handing out tracts, you have to understand the mechanics of their faith.
Exactly. You cannot divorce the architecture of the building from the deeply held convictions of the architect.
Well said.
The gospel transformed Crossover's life. He fundamentally believes it saved him from his own darkness.
Right.
And because he feels saved, he feels an overwhelming, non-negotiable divine calling to give that salvation both in its spiritual form and its highly practical economic form back to the world.
This vision is the ultimate literal definition of faith in action.
It really is.
It is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot in religious circles, often is just a platitude, but here it has real structural teeth.
Yeah, it's not just a bumper sticker.
The spiritual message of salvation and inherent human value is the exact combustible fuel that motivates the physical work of feeding the starving and teaching the uneducated.
Yes.
They are not executing these massive practical programs to replace their faith or to act as a PR front for it. They are executing them because their theology demands it.
If we look at the theological underpinning, there's a famous passage in the book of James that addresses this exact friction.
Oh, yeah.
It essentially argues that faith without works is dead. It poses a highly practical scenario. If you see a brother or sister without clothes and daily food, and you simply say to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but you do absolutely nothing to address their physical bodily needs.
What good is your faith?
Exactly. Pastor Art and Crossover are building a multi-million-dollar monument to that specific idea. Their theology demands the food pantry.
It demands the liability of the daycare.
It demands the complexity of the AI training. Because in their view, if you truly love your neighbor, you don't just pray for them, you engineer the tools for them to thrive.
Pastor Art talks extensively about the concept of initiation. He insists that positive systemic change always begins with people willing to take the first step.
Yeah, the first step is crucial.
And when you analyze this blueprint, that concept of the first step operates on two incredibly distinct, equally terrifying levels.
Break down the dichotomy of those two levels for us.
Well, think about the individual walking through the doors for help. If you are entirely lost, if you have been battling substance addiction for a decade, if you have been repeatedly beaten down by a system that tells you are worthless.
Shame is overwhelming.
Exactly. The psychological shame is an immense barrier. The sheer courage it takes to swallow that pride, to walk up to the doors of a public building, look another human being in the eye and say, "I am broken. I cannot do this alone. I need a meal."
That is a monumental, ego-destroying first step.
It is terrifying for the individual.
It is an act of profound, agonizing vulnerability.
Yes. But then pivot and look at the other side of the equation. Look at Crossover. Look at Pastor Art. Look at the team drafting this architectural blueprint.
Right.
The courage it takes to look at a devastated urban community, to look at the staggering, depressing statistics of generational poverty, to look at the widening chasm of the digital divide and the impossible math of the childcare crisis.
That's a lot to take on.
And to take the first step in saying, we are going to build a multi-tiered, technology-driven, spiritually grounded fortress to fight this. That is an equally terrifying first step for the institution.
The sheer scale of potential failure is massive.
It is the collision of two incredible leaps of faith. The marginalized community leaping toward the church for survival, and the church leaping toward the community with a radically ambitious, highly complex safety net.
And when you trace the origin of both of those leaps, it all circles back to the very beginning of our conversation.
Back to the grandfather.
It circles back to the grandfather.
It really does. It forces you to reflect on the sheer, stubborn persistence of human influence.
It's powerful.
The idea that an individual's impact doesn't terminate when their biological life ends. It simply changes form. It continues, compounding like interest through the people they taught, the people they corrected, and the people they inspired.
The grandfather gave Crossover the gospel. He gave him the philosophical blueprint for what it means to truly, practically serve the marginalized.
But above all the lessons, he gave him his unwavering, irrational belief.
Right. He planted a seed of profound confidence in a young man. And now, decades later, that single seed has germinated into this massive, sprawling, highly systemic tree.
A huge tree.
Crossover is taking that exact same trinity of gifts,
Yeah.
the spiritual faith, the practical imperative to serve, and the unyielding belief in human potential, and he is preparing to distribute it across a hurting neighborhood.
He is essentially broadcasting a message to the world. My grandfather gave me the gospel. He taught me the mechanics of empathy. He showed me with his own hands how to help people. He believed in me when I had nothing.
And now, I want to take what he gave me and give something back to the world.
Yes, now, I am going to take every single ounce of what he gave me, combine it with the tools of the modern world, and give it back to the people who need it most.
That's a beautiful mission.
So when we zoom out, when we pull back from the logistics of daycare and AI and food pantries, what is the ultimate takeaway of this blueprint?
When you synthesize the overarching themes of Crossover Church, peace, love, hope, faith, service, and community, you are looking at a comprehensive blueprint for total human restoration.
Total human restoration.
We have journeyed from a grandfather's deeply personal, quiet, localized legacy of compassion in the past, all the way to a highly systematic, futuristic vision of an AI training hub and comprehensive poverty intervention in the future.
Right.
But the emotional core, the absolute center of gravity that keeps this massive project from collapsing under its own weight, is the belief in the power of one.
The power of one individual.
Yes. In a world dominated by macro statistics, in a society where the sheer scale of systemic poverty, addiction, and technological displacement feels so overwhelmingly massive that it paralyzes our institutions into inaction.
It makes you feel helpless.
Exactly. But the core philosophy driving Crossover is that helping one specific person matters infinitely.
Just one.
Radically altering the economic trajectory of one single mother through free daycare matters. Teaching one struggling young man how to code and navigate a corporate interview matters.
Giving one homeless individual a hot meal and a moment of dignity matters.
Because one person helped, one person who successfully navigates the transition from surviving to rebuilding becomes a node in a new network.
They become a beacon.
They could eventually turn around, reach back across the bridge, and pull another person forward. It is the intentional design of an infinite chain reaction of hope.
You don't have to save the entire world in one sweeping motion. You just have to engineer the environment where the chain reaction can begin.
Precisely.
And that brings us full circle, right back to that initial image of walking into a building that refuses to be categorized.
Yeah.
A space that is simultaneously a spiritual sanctuary, a high-tech school, a dining room for the hungry, and an economic launchpad.
It is a vision that completely challenges the status quo.
It demands that we ask significantly more of our community spaces, more of our faith-based organizations, and ultimately, more of ourselves.
It serves as a profound reminder that a legacy isn't an artifact you passively inherit and put on a shelf. It is an active foundation you are required to build upon.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you with a specific thought to mull over today.
Leave them with something to think about.
Think about the architecture of your own life. Think about the teachers, the mentors, the family members, who was the specific person who looked at you and believed in your potential before you possessed the evidence to believe in it yourself.
Who was your grandfather figure?
Exactly. What invisible legacy, what specific architecture of the soul did they install inside of you?
Yeah.
And more importantly, when you look at the highly complex, often hurting world around you right now, what first step are you waiting to take to pass that exact same belief on to someone else who is desperately waiting for it?
The legacy has been transferred. It is in your hands now.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the blueprint and vision of Crossover Community. Keep